God of War has been one of Sony's biggest franchises for 2 decades now, with the series officially celebrating its 20th anniversary. Earlier this year, the series started out as a high-octane Greek-era hack-and-slash game, and has since evolved into a more grounded, mature, and cinematic experience set in Norse mythology. But God of War Ragnarok was officially the end of the Norse era, and we're currently waiting on God of War 6, which is reportedly going to be another massive overhaul of the series, serving as the second series reboot. Now, we don't know what mythological era God of War 6 is going to take place in, but we do know that recently we got a report from credible sources regarding a spin-off game that Sony greenlit as a way to keep us occupied while Santa Monica Studios is working on the next mainline entry in the series. So today we're going to go over everything we know about the upcoming God of War spin-off game, including what kind of game it will be, when it's going to release, and how it will play in other future projects. We have a lot to cover, guys, so check the video chapters for easy viewing, and let's get started. So leading up to the various summer game showcases, rumors started circulating about what Sony was going to show off in terms of their first party studios and franchises. Obviously, the state of play ended up being a tad bit underwhelming on that front, as the only new PlayStation Studios game to be announced was the new Marvel fighting game, which looks awesome, but a lot of people were thinking that there was going to be something associated with God of War. After all, the franchise turned 20 years old this year, and there's an Amazon adaptation in the works, so it seemed like the right time to announce another God of War game, or at the very least confirm the existence of the long-awaited HD re-releases of the Greek era games. But a new rumor started making the rounds in the days before the State of Play presentation regarding a smaller scale spin-off game set in the God of War universe. Now, rumors of a God of War spin-off game have actually been going around for a few years now. Following the release of Ragnarok, there were several insiders claiming that there was a spin-off game starring Atreus in the works that would essentially serve as a mini sequel to God of War Ragnarok and be more of a proper send-off for the character before going into God of War 6. Kind of similar to a game in the same similar fashion that Insomniac did with Spider-Man Miles Morales. Now, obviously we haven't heard anything about that game yet, but we'll talk more about that later on in the video, because this set of rumors was about something completely different. According to sources, the new God of War spin-off game is going to be a 2.5D game set during the Greek era of the canon, and the gameplay structure will be closer to a Metroidvania than a traditional God of War title. And when I hear that, I immediately picture something like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, but God of War. Now, this right here would be a huge departure from the series, because even though there has been smaller scale games in the God of War series up to this point, nothing has really strayed too far from what the mainline games were doing at the time. A 2.5D Metroidvania God of War game would be absolutely insane, and a huge change of pace from basically everything that's come out in the series up to this point. I absolutely love Metroidvania games. If it's anything like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, that would be absolutely amazing. Now, these rumors first started floating around a day or two before the 2025 summer State of Play, but they were actually corroborated by several trusted insiders in the gaming industry. Tom Henderson was asked about the rumors on Twitter and replied this, and I quote, "I'm hearing a lot of scuttlebutt about a 2.5D/Metroidvania game, or whatever it will be. Yeah, it seems to be much smaller in scale than what I initially thought. Granted, the project ended up not being at the State of Play like we thought Henderson might be implying, but the fact that he's speaking about this project kind of speaks volumes to me, as he tends to be one of the most consistent insiders in the gaming world." Jeff Grubb also corroborated that a 2.5D God of War game exists as well, although I will say Jeff Grubb's track record has been a little spotty in recent months. But if both Jeff Grubb and Tom Henderson agree that the project exists, I think that's more than enough for me to believe it as well. This may seem like a pretty left field decision from Sony when it comes to approving new God of War projects, but it actually tracks with what other studios have been doing recently. Ubisoft received critical acclaim for their Metroidvania Prince of Persia game, The Lost Crown, and there is a ton of buzz around the industry for a new Hollow Knight game. Silksong, we're apparently getting it this year, which is exciting. And honestly, Hollow Knight is one of the best Metroidvanias of the modern era. Metroid Dread also received great reviews and made a pretty hefty profit for Nintendo given their relatively low budget. So if Sony is looking for easy ways to earn goodwill from players and improve profit margins in the face of ever-growing budgets, this is actually a fantastic way of doing it. In my opinion, we need more games that are of the AA budget. Not every game needs needs to be AAA in terms of budget and scale. Now, one thing that I want to know, and I know I'm not alone here, is just how old school is this game going to be? If you go back and play the original God of War Greek era games, you'll immediately see how insane they were compared to the Norse saga, and that's not to be in like any shade towards the reboot era of God of War, because those games are amazing in their own right, but there's no denying that God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok both drastically toned down the violence and adult content from the original trilogy. The old God of War games were insanely gory and had a ton of explicit content, so if Sony is authorizing a return to the Greek era of the franchise, does that mean we're going to get that tone back as well? Another element of the classic games that was up in the air with this spin-off is the art style. God of War 2018 introduced a very realistic style to the franchise, but the original Greek era had a very distinct art style. It wasn't going for realism in any regard, and it still looked absolutely beautiful. So will this new spin-off game try to recreate the original trilogy's more colorful and exaggerated art style, or will it try to adapt the world of Greek mythology into a more realistic, modern God of War style? Personally, I would love to see the old art style come back, especially if we're going to be playing a 2.5D Metroidvania game, since those games tend to have things like massive jumps and double jumps and a much faster paced combat than the Norse era games. And I don't think the realistic art style would look right with that kind of gameplay. In my opinion, it should look like The Lost Crown, but maybe tune the visuals a little bit more to make it look more like God of War like the original, but with a refreshed and like fully HD art style. Now, assuming the project is real, which it really seems to be, we have to think about when Sony is going to reveal and release it. Some PlayStation fans have been getting frustrated at the lack of first-party announcements from Sony over the last few years, but on the other hand, you have to remember that a lot of studios and publishers have openly talked about the fact that modern AAA gaming is moving towards a model of shorter marketing campaigns, meaning there is going to be less time from announcement to release in the years to come. So just because the game hasn't been announced yet doesn't mean it's long away. Heck, Capcom just announced Resident Evil 9 at Summer Game Fest with a release date in February, which is only 8 months away. That being said, I think Sony probably would have announced this game if it was going to drop in 2025. So if the project is real, then I would say that it's going to release sometime in 2026 at the absolute earliest. It's also possible that the project gets pushed back to like 2027 because we don't know how long it's been in development, if the game is even real, or if it has been like canceled or anything. We don't really know those details. But let's say that it is in development. It's safe to assume that it's going to be going through development much quicker than the full-fledged God of War titles, which is kind of obvious. So we should expect a development cycle of at least 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. So if the game has entered development within the last year or so, it's probably at least another year away. So I wouldn't expect to hear about this game until early 2026. Maybe Sony is planning on showing it off like perhaps at the first state of play in 2026. Obviously, we know we have a state of play in July, which is going to be mainly for Ghost of Yotei, but we also typically get a state of play in September as well. If the project is real, I'm guessing that we'll get it at the first state of play of 2026, and then it will release like later in the year, similar to how they handled Astro Bot, which was announced in the May 2025 state of play and then released later that year. Now, granted, this does kind of depend on what else Sony is working on right now, because if they have Insomniac working on some new games, which we know for a fact they are, and those games are supposed to drop in 2026 as well, they might want to space things out a little bit so they don't cannibalize each other. If Wolverine is actually coming out next year, Sony probably wants at least 3 to 4 months between that game and the new God of War game, so that way they don't cannibalize each other. They don't want people to have to pick between one game or the other. So my prediction is that Sony is going to announce the new God of War project, if they end up doing it, in February or March of 2026, and then release it over the summer. While if Wolverine is releasing next year, then that will likely be a 2026 holiday release date. Well, like I mentioned earlier, this does kind of throw the status of the new Atreus Spinoff game that has been heavily rumored up in the air, because we were all pretty certain that Sony Santa Monica was working on that game. But as of recording this video, we still haven't heard anything about it. Plus, if Sony is planning on releasing a God of War Greek era game in the near future, I think it's safe to assume that they are officially closing the book on the Norse saga, at least for the rest of the PlayStation 5 generation. So frankly, I think the Atreus game, assuming it was actually ever in development, is not going to be happening. Maybe there was a plan to take the unused Ragnarok content and turn it into a spin-off game, but then plans changed, and now there just isn't enough room in the release schedule for it. But honestly, I think it's a good idea to take those games back to the Greek era while the Amazon show carries on the Norse era's legacy. You don't want to overwhelm the audience with too much content set in the same time period with a franchise like God of War. This is a series that's known for taking us to amazing places and adapting tons of cool parts of mythology, and since we've been in the Norse era era for 8 years now, I think it's time for the games to shake things up while the TV show keeps the Norse train chugging. So RIP to the Atreus Spinoff game, but then again, I would ultimately rather have a return to the Greek era if I had to pick one or the other. Also, if it's a Metroidvania game, like I absolutely love Metroidvania. So God of War plus Metroidvania, like that is a recipe for success that I really need to happen. Like this game has to happen. But yeah, guys, that's gonna wrap it up with this video. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel with your notifications turned on so you're not missing out on any future gaming news. And until next time, this has been Wes, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.